When people think of ancient civilizations, their minds often go straight to Rome, Greece, or Egypt. These cultures dominate our history books, documentaries, and even Hollywood blockbusters. But very few stop to consider the rich and complex story of ancient Persia, a civilization that for a time overshadowed them all. The Persian Empire was more than just another regional power. It was a vast and sophisticated machine of governance, culture, and strategy that stretched across 3 continents. At its height, it ruled over nearly half of the world's population, an astonishing feat for any empire in antiquity. The fact that such a monumental force is often relegated to the shadows of historical memory is a disservice not only to Persia, but to our understanding of global history. What makes Persia particularly fascinating is how different it was from its contemporaries in both ideology and execution. Its model of empire was based more on integration than domination. And while our knowledge of ancient Persia often comes filtered through the writings of Greek historians, who were frequently at odds with the Persians, new sources, like archaeological finds and royal inscriptions, have helped paint a more accurate picture. These alternative accounts allow us to reassess a misunderstood civilization, one that was far more advanced, tolerant, and efficient than its rivals would have us believe. Most of what we know about the Persians has been filtered through the pens of their enemies, particularly the Greeks. Historians like Herodotus, Xenophon, and Ctesias chronicled Persian affairs with varying degrees of bias, often portraying them as exotic, tyrannical, or decadent. Even the names of Persian kings were changed through this Greek lens. Kurush became Cyrus, Darav was rewritten as Darius, and Kshayarsha became Xerxes. These distortions extended beyond mere names. Cultural misunderstandings ran deep, with Greek writers interpreting Persian customs through the framework of their own values. Thankfully, modern research has uncovered more direct sources. Among the most important are the thousands of clay tablets found in the royal archives at Persepolis. Written in cuneiform, these documents reveal details about everything from trade and taxation to labor and religious rituals. They show a society that was meticulously organized and surprisingly progressive. The Persians themselves, known as the Parsa, were part of the broader Indo-Iranian family and had once lived as migratory pastoralists. They originated in regions that are now part of modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan before gradually moving south into the fertile lands of Mesopotamia. There, they adapted and thrived, developing a way of life that emphasized seasonal movement, horseback mastery, and a hardy resilience shaped by both climate and necessity. By the way, if you're enjoying this deep dive into a forgotten empire, I'd love your support. Our channel is on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers by June 30th. Your click can help us bring more untold histories like this to light. Unlike the image of wandering desert nomads that many associate with early tribal peoples, the Persians practiced a unique form of seasonal migration known as vertical nomadism. This meant moving their herds up into highland pastures during the summer and descending into more temperate lowlands during the winter months, a method still observed among some groups in the Caucasus. Today, their lifestyle was rugged but not primitive. They wore practical clothing suited for horseback travel, including trousers, uncommon in neighboring Mesopotamian societies, and distinctive pointed hats called tiaras. In terms of appearance, they stood apart from the people of the Fertile Crescent, often being taller and possessing lighter complexions. Their diet was modest, and they were known to drink alcohol sparingly, which set them apart culturally as well. What truly distinguished them, however, was their equestrian skill. They were not merely warriors on horseback, they were horsemen by tradition and necessity. The horse was central to their way of life and their military strategies. Their values revolved around strength, discipline, and honor, characteristics encapsulated in the very root of the word pars, which meant warrior or strong man. This cultural and physical identity formed the foundation upon which their empire would later be built. The turning point in Persian history came in the 6th century BCE with the rise of Cyrus II, a man whose legacy would echo across continents and centuries. Born into a Persian family still subjugated to the powerful Median Empire, Cyrus saw opportunity where others saw inevitability. Discontent among the Median nobility created an opening, and Cyrus capitalized on it. Several prominent Median clans defected and lent him support, helping him orchestrate a rebellion that culminated in a decisive victory against the Median king, Astyages. With the collapse of Median power, Cyrus established his own capital at Pasargadae, laying the foundation of what would soon become the largest empire the world had ever known. But Cyrus wasn't content with merely inheriting a throne. He had a vision of unifying lands and cultures under one rule. He launched an extraordinary series of military campaigns, rapidly expanding Persian control across Parthia, Armenia, Cappadocia, Elam, Lydia, and Ionia. Some regions surrendered peacefully, seeing Persian rule as preferable to chaos or existing regimes. Others resisted but were swiftly overcome by Cyrus's disciplined and motivated forces. His genius lay not only in conquest, but in consolidation, in knowing when to use force and when to extend an open hand. Cyrus's most iconic victory came with the fall of Babylon, a city steeped in power, history, and religious symbolism. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, then under King Nabonidus, had become increasingly unstable. According to ancient records and religious texts, the king had alienated the priesthood and failed to honor the chief deity, Marduk. This created widespread dissatisfaction among Babylon's elite. When Cyrus's forces approached the city, they encountered almost no resistance. The gates were opened without a fight, and the ruling class welcomed him as a liberator rather than a conqueror. Far from plundering the city, Cyrus adopted a policy of clemency and integration. He allowed displaced peoples, including the Jews exiled by the Babylonians, to return to their ancestral lands, and even helped fund the rebuilding of sacred sites like the Temple in Jerusalem. This approach earned him admiration across different cultures and religions, with the Bible even referring to him in favorable terms. Cyrus understood that an empire as diverse as his could not survive through fear alone. His strategy was to empower local elites, respect native traditions, and avoid disrupting existing social and administrative structures whenever possible. By choosing cooperation over coercion, he created a sense of unity that made rebellion less likely. Despite his remarkable political instincts and inclusive governance, Cyrus was still a warrior at heart, and he knew that securing the empire's borders required continual vigilance. His next major campaign took him northward to confront the Massagetæ, a confederation of fierce nomadic tribes led by Queen Tomyris. These tribes posed a constant threat to the northern fringes of Persian territory. In what would become one of the most dramatic and tragic episodes of his reign, Cyrus led his army into battle against them. The campaign, however, ended in catastrophe. The Persian forces were nearly annihilated, and Cyrus himself was killed in action. According to various accounts, though some heroic, others brutal, Queen Tomyris is said to have found his corpse and declared that he had thirsted for blood, so she would give him his fill. His death sent shockwaves through the empire, but the structure he had built was strong enough to endure. His son, Cambyses II, inherited the throne and immediately faced the challenge of holding together a realm built on fragile alliances and newly conquered provinces. Rebellions flared across the empire as regions tested the strength of the new ruler, forcing Cambyses into a relentless series of military campaigns to reassert control and prove his legitimacy. Once Cambyses II had restored order among the rebellious provinces, he set his sights on fulfilling one of his father's unachieved ambitions, the conquest of Egypt. With a massive army behind him, Cambyses advanced into the Nile Valley and quickly overwhelmed the Egyptian forces. The city of Memphis fell, and the pharaoh was taken prisoner. In a relatively short time, Egypt, long regarded as one of the most formidable civilizations of the ancient world, became another jewel in the Persian crown. Libya also came under Persian control. Shortly thereafter, Cambyses, emboldened by these victories, began plotting further expansions, including campaigns against Carthage in the west and Kush to the south. However, these new ambitions met logistical challenges. The Kushite expedition faltered due to supply chain failures, with troops unable to sustain themselves in the unforgiving terrain. Meanwhile, the planned invasion of Carthage was abandoned entirely when the Phoenician fleet, essential to the campaign, refused to fight their own kin. Then another crisis erupted. Babylon, recently pacified, rebelled once more. Cambyses marched out to crush the uprising, but fell ill on the journey. He died before he could return to Persia, leaving the empire vulnerable and in need of stable leadership. The question of succession plunged Persia into turmoil. Officially, power was meant to pass to Cambyses' brother, Bardia, or so it seemed. But a man named Darius, a member of a noble family and an officer in the royal guard, claimed that the man on the throne was not the real Bardia, but an impostor, a priest named Gaumata. According to Darius, the true Bardia had been secretly killed by Cambyses long before his own death. Using this accusation, Darius rallied support and orchestrated a coup, ultimately seizing the throne for himself. Though not directly descended from Cyrus, Darius legitimized his claim by asserting lineage from Achaemenes, a forebear of Cyrus's dynasty. From that moment forward, the ruling family became known as the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius's first years as king were marked by widespread unrest. Dozens of provinces rose up in defiance, and the empire seemed poised to unravel. But Darius responded swiftly and decisively, crushing the revolts one by one. Though he wasn't known as a battlefield commander, his administrative genius began to shine. He laid the foundation for a new kind of imperial order, one based on clearly defined regions, accountable leadership, and streamlined governance. Reforms that would become the true backbone of the Persian state. To bring stability to such a vast and culturally diverse empire, Darius reorganized its internal structure in a way that was both innovative and effective. He divided the realm into several administrative regions called satrapies, each governed by a satrap, a kind of provincial governor responsible for civil administration, tax collection, and infrastructure oversight. These satraps had considerable autonomy in managing local affairs, but their authority was balanced by a system of checks, including royal inspectors known as the king's eyes and ears. Initially, satraps also held military command within their territories, but after some of them attempted to revolt, Darius changed course. Military power was centralized under commanders loyal directly to the king, creating a division of authority that minimized the risk of rebellious satraps turning their armies against the throne. This layered system helped maintain cohesion across an empire that spanned from the Balkans to the Indus Valley. To support this administrative network, Darius introduced a standardized monetary system centering around the gold daric, a coin of great purity and value. It facilitated commerce and taxation across far-flung regions, unifying the economy in ways never before seen on such a scale. In short, Darius's genius was not conquest, but control. Infrastructure played a crucial role in Darius's vision for a unified empire. One of his most impressive achievements was the construction of a vast network of roads, which dramatically improved communication, trade, and military logistics. The most renowned of these routes, The royal road stretched from Sardis in Lydia all the way to Susa in Elam, covering over 2,500 kilometers. Along this highway, relay stations with fresh horses and couriers ensured that messages could travel at unprecedented speed, a precursor to modern postal systems. These routes also allowed for rapid deployment of troops, giving the central government a strategic advantage in quelling uprisings and maintaining order. Maritime trade was enhanced as well. Darius commissioned the construction of a navigable canal that connected the Red Sea to a tributary of the Nile, facilitating transport between Africa and the Persian heartland. Though not a full connection to the Mediterranean, this waterway significantly boosted naval commerce. Meanwhile, monumental architecture flourished under his reign. Darius made Persepolis the ceremonial capital of the empire, complementing older centers like Pasargadae and Babylon. Lavishly decorated halls, sculptures, and inscriptions celebrated the empire's diversity, portraying dignitaries from all corners of the realm, not as subjugated peoples, but as respected participants in a shared imperial identity. If you've made it this far, you clearly value stories that go beyond what we're taught in school. A like and a follow would mean a lot. It helps us reach more curious minds, just like yours. Among the many lasting symbols of Persian military might, none stands out more than the Immortals, the empire's elite force of heavy infantry. This formidable unit was composed of 10,000 highly trained soldiers who by tradition were kept at a constant number. If one fell in battle, was injured or retired, he was immediately replaced to preserve the illusion and reality of an indestructible force. The name Immortals, however, likely stems from a mistranslation of a term meaning companions in Old Persian, but the mythology endured. These soldiers were equipped with spears, swords, bows, and wicker shields, wearing scaled armor that offered both mobility and protection. Behind them stood legions of archers, slingers, and cavalry, both heavy and light, drawn from across the empire's vast territories. Persian armies were some of the most multicultural forces of the ancient world. Troops from Egypt, Babylon, Syria, and even Greece served in its ranks, either as auxiliaries or mercenaries. These diverse elements brought varied combat styles and strategies to the battlefield, making the Persian military incredibly adaptive. Their strength lay not just in numbers, but in the capacity to coordinate such variety into a cohesive and deadly force, one capable of projecting power across thousands of miles. While Persian power was often demonstrated on the battlefield, its spiritual and philosophical foundations were equally important to its longevity. The religion of the Persian elite was Mazdaism, an early form of Zoroastrianism. At its core stood Ahura Mazda, regarded as the supreme deity, the god of truth, order, and wisdom. Unlike later Zoroastrianism, which leaned more towards strict monotheism, Mazdaism was henotheistic, recognizing other divine beings but giving primacy to one. Among these were Mithra, the god of light and covenant, Anahita, the goddess of fertility and water, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of evil. This religious framework mirrored the empire itself, a complex system built on the balance of forces. Notably, the Persians didn't enforce religious uniformity. Local beliefs and deities were respected, even embraced, by imperial policy. Babylonian worship of Marduk, Jewish devotion to Yahweh, Egyptian reverence for Amun, and Greek temples to Zeus all coexisted under Persian rule. Such tolerance wasn't just a moral stance, it was strategic, reducing resistance and earning loyalty from conquered peoples. A curious cultural tradition also reflected their values. Major decisions were discussed twice, once while drunk and again while sober. If an idea passed both tests, it was considered sound, a practice rooted in their belief that intoxication removed inhibition and exposed truth. The first major confrontation between Persia and the Greek world began with the Ionian Revolt in 499 BCE. Greek city-states along the coast of Asia Minor, feeling oppressed under Persian administration, rose in rebellion, supported by mainland Athens and Eretria. The uprising culminated in the bold attack and burning of Sardis, the capital of the Lydian satrapy. Although the rebellion was eventually crushed after 7 years, the insult was not forgotten in Persia. Darius, enraged by the defiance and interference of Athens and Eretria, sought to punish them. He dispatched envoys to various Greek city-states demanding symbolic tokens of submission, earth and water. Some complied, but the most powerful, Athens and Sparta, refused defiantly. In Sparta, the envoys were thrown into a well and mockingly told to find their earth and water there. In Athens, they were executed outright. These actions provoked a full-scale military response. In 490 BCE, Darius sent a formidable Persian army to the Greek mainland. They landed at the plain of Marathon, aiming to march inland and destroy Athens. But the Athenians, joined by allies from Plataea, had already assembled. Though heavily outnumbered, the Greek forces held a higher, more strategic ground. What followed would become one of the most famous battles in ancient history. As the Persian forces prepared to launch their attack at Marathon, their commander, Darius, began to question the wisdom of engaging uphill against a well-positioned Greek force. He decided instead to withdraw and sail around the coast to strike Athens directly, assuming it would be left unguarded. But before the Persians could embark, the Athenian general Miltiades seized the moment. He ordered a sudden charge that took the Persian army by surprise while they were reboarding their ships. The Greek phalanx, heavily armored and fighting in disciplined formation, slammed into the more lightly armed Persians, disrupting their lines and sowing chaos. Despite being outnumbered more than 2-1, the Greeks inflicted massive losses. Around 7,000 elite Persian troops were killed, and many more were forced to retreat to their ships. Greek casualties were shockingly low, with fewer than 200 men lost. Though this was not the end of Persian ambitions in Greece, the Battle of Marathon dealt a severe blow to their prestige and halted the immediate threat to Athens. Darius planned a renewed campaign, but internal revolts, especially in Egypt, diverted his attention. Before he could act again, he died, leaving the task of avenging Persia's honor to his son, Xerxes, a man determined to succeed where his father had failed. When Xerxes ascended the throne, he inherited not only his father's empire, but also his unresolved grudge against Greece. Determined to succeed where Darius had failed, Xerxes began assembling what would become one of the largest military forces of the ancient world. Though Greek historians exaggerated its size, claiming over 1 million troops, modern estimates suggest the army likely numbered around 200,000, still an immense force by ancient standards. Xerxes chose to invade by land, constructing massive pontoon bridges across the Hellespont and cutting a canal through the Athos Peninsula to ensure naval passage. In 480 BCE, he launched his invasion, and Greek city-states, normally rivals, formed a fragile alliance to defend their homeland. They made their first stand at the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae. Though remembered largely for the 300 Spartans, the defenders included several thousand soldiers from various city-states. For 2 days, they held off wave after wave of Persian assaults. But betrayal came in the form of a local who revealed a secret path to the Persians, allowing them to flank the Greek position. Realizing they were surrounded, most Greek troops withdrew. Only the Spartans and a few allies remained, choosing to fight to the death in a legendary act of sacrifice and defiance. Following the fall of Thermopylae, the Persian army pushed forward and entered Athens, only to find it largely deserted. The Athenian population had evacuated to nearby islands, and the city's defenders had taken to the sea. Xerxes ordered the city burned, but the war was far from over. The decisive moment would come at sea, near the island of Salamis. The Greek fleet, though outnumbered, was composed primarily of heavy triremes, robust, maneuverable ships designed for ramming. Themistocles, the Athenian commander, lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland. Once inside, the Persians lost their ability to maneuver. Effectively, the Greek triremes struck with force and precision, breaking the Persian formation and causing widespread panic. By the end of the day, a third of Xerxes' navy was destroyed. Realizing his supply lines were now compromised, Xerxes began a retreat. Though he left behind a portion of his army to continue the campaign, their morale had crumbled. One by one, they were defeated in subsequent battles. Eventually, Persia was forced to abandon its efforts to conquer Greece, withdrawing and ceding control of the Ionian coast. It was a humiliating defeat, but Persia's ambitions in the region were not entirely extinguished. After the military setbacks in Greece, Persia shifted its strategy from warfare to influence. Rather than engage in further large-scale invasions, the empire turned to diplomacy, cultural integration, and political manipulation. Persian gold began flowing into Greek city-states, used to bribe politicians, fund allies, and sway public opinion. Figures such as Themistocles and others were rumored to have accepted these gifts, fostering internal divisions that weakened Greek unity. Meanwhile, Persia continued to thrive as a multicultural and economically vibrant empire. Its administrative reforms endured, and trade flourished across its vast territories. From the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, goods, ideas, and technologies moved swiftly along the empire's well-maintained roads and maritime routes. Still, despite its external calm, the seeds of future conflict had been planted. In the 4th century BCE, a new power was rising in the north, Macedonia. Under the leadership of King Philip II, the Greek city-states were finally being unified, not by diplomacy or shared identity, but by force. Philip began preparing for a long-dreamed-of invasion of Persia, believing it was time to end the old Eastern dominance. But just before he could launch his campaign, he was assassinated in a mysterious plot that remains debated to this day. The death of Philip II might have ended the dream of conquering Persia, but instead it lit the spark that would eventually engulf the empire. His son Alexander, only 18 at the time, assumed power and quickly proved to be a military prodigy. Inheriting a seasoned army and a well-organized kingdom, he wasted no time initiating his father's plans. What followed was one of the most astonishing military campaigns in history. Over the course of just over a decade, Alexander dismantled the Persian Empire piece by piece. His forces employed superior tactics, notably the Macedonian phalanx, a compact, disciplined infantry formation, combined with exceptional cavalry maneuvers and psychological warfare. But Alexander's victories weren't due to numbers alone. His charisma, daring, and almost reckless courage inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure. He led from the front, personally engaging in combat, and survived numerous wounds that would have ended most men. Persian forces, though still formidable, were unable to adapt to his lightning-fast strategies. City after city fell, and even Persian generals defected. In 329 BCE, after more than 2 centuries of dominance, the Achaemenid Empire was no more. But though its political structure had collapsed, the Persian legacy was far from erased. Even after Alexander's conquests, the cultural and administrative achievements of Persia continued to echo through the centuries. Alexander himself adopted many elements of Persian court. Customs, dress, and even political structure, marrying a Persian noblewoman and promoting the integration of Greek and Persian elites. After his death, his empire fragmented, but Persia's heartland remained a vital center of power. The Seleucid Empire, one of the Hellenistic successor states, governed much of the former Persian territory, but struggled to fully replace the traditions that had been in place for generations. Eventually, native dynasties reasserted control. The Parthians revived. Persian authority with a decentralized but resilient state, followed centuries later by the Sasanian Empire, a return to strong central rule and Persian identity. Under the Sasanians, many elements of Achaemenid culture, religion, and governance were revived and refined. Even after the Islamic conquest of Persia in the 7th century CE, the Persian language, literary heritage, and administrative models continued to influence Islamic civilization. Far from being a relic of the past, Persia's legacy was absorbed, adapted, and passed on, shaping empires from India to Europe and contributing to global civilization in ways few empires ever could. Today, the imprint of ancient Persia remains indelible. Modern Iran, a name derived from Ariana, the ancient Persian term for their homeland, still carries linguistic, cultural, and spiritual echoes of that empire. Zoroastrian communities, though now a minority, continue to preserve the core tenets of the faith that once guided the kings of kings. The concept of governance through tolerance, infrastructure that unites vast lands, and a shared cultural identity among diverse peoples. These were Persian innovations long before they became hallmarks of modern states. The Persian Empire didn't merely conquer territory, it fostered a civilization that valued complexity, resilience, and coexistence. It demonstrated that an empire's strength lies not only in its armies, but in its ability to bring people together without erasing who they are. And though the mighty Achaemenid Empire fell to the sword of a Macedonian general, its soul was never extinguished. It survived in ideas, in language, in stories, and in the enduring pride of a people who once ruled half the known world, not just by power, but by wisdom. In remembering Persia, we are reminded that true greatness is not measured by how long an empire lasts, but by how deeply it shapes the future. Which part of Persia's story surprised you the most? The tolerance, the military, or the cultural legacy? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps shape our next episodes.